Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. You get those days when you've got quite a bit to do and don't actually want to do any of it, but we've got to get on. So today's video is a repot of three of my what come into the cooler, shadier set. There's a variety of genera in that set. It's not all like Masdevallias, or there's a mixture, but they all come into the same sort of care, and in the main can be classed as needing the same media, although there are some exceptions. So what we've got today are two Restrepias and a Masdevallia, and they're all going in the same media, which is my theory at the moment. This is Sanguinea, and it's got a capital A on the end. It came from Burnham's, and that A means something to that nursery. Now that could be part of a registration name. It could have something to do with where it came from, because it could have actually come from the Eric Young Foundation originally. But the reason it's coming out of here is, firstly, the roots are not doing that well, and it just needs refreshing, basically. Do you know, my notes are wrong. This has not long been repotted. That is not old media. But what it is still not growing very well. So I'm going to change the media. I mean, basically that hasn't long been repotted. That bark is not old. And in my notes it says it's got coconut husk in it. Well, it hasn't. That's just got some medium bark for crocking and small bark. That's all that's in that plant, or was. Sorry, that's all that plant was in. Not only don't I want to do stuff today, even my mouth don't want to play ball. Right, so that's that one. That didn't really need to come out of the pot. And I reckon this one may be in... No, this one looks a bit green, so not sure with this one. We'll get it out and have a look. But that last one, my notes were wrong, because that had been repotted. Now the notes are right here, because this has got very full roots and it is in cocoa husk. Now this one had the giant bark put in the bottom, which we always rescue. I was going to say, you have to put up with the noise. I haven't long changed the thermostat, so the heater's kicking in and out to get it up to my daytime temperature from nighttime. Yeah, these huge chunky pieces of bark are rock hard despite them being several years old. So I rescue those. I just put them in some boiling water for a while and basically sterilise them and then reuse them for crocking. I would use them to plant things in if I had things to plant in, in that sort of thing. And I will have... Get my coffee away from the plant, or the leaves will dip in it. Yes, I have got a repot that will be totally different, and it's my two of my Cattleya types, and they're in holy clay pots, so they're a pain in the whatnot to get out. And in addition to that, those are rubbish, they're too old. In addition to that, they will go in a mixture of large and medium bark. So, right, and then the last one is the Masdevallia that came from mixed Masdevallia, and it's Inca Prince. And the reason this is coming out is that it's been in here a while. I've never taken it out of the pot, and I want to see what's going on. It's in a black pot. I also wanted to see what it was in, because I don't want to change it to any great extent. Now this doesn't look like a bad root system, quite honestly. Certainly these are lovely roots down here, and active too. So this is just going to get refreshed. That's all. I'm not going to disturb these roots to any huge extent, but there is a mass of dead roots in the middle here which I will trim off. And then some new media can go up in there, but we've got active roots on this plant coming down the outside, so that's good. See, now the roots here are stuck to the media. Well, they can stay stuck, but I will take off these. There's a mass of dead roots in the centre of the plant, basically, so we will just snip those out. They're just in the middle. That makes a nice hollow in the middle now that can have some media in. Now I've been looking up, I've been using perlite quite a bit lately in my mixes, so I thought I'd better just check up what that stuff's all about. The first thing I asked was, does it actually hold water? And yes, it does. It's actually good for moisture retention. So it is actually porous. So you need to bear that in mind when you're using it. And in addition to that, it is very good at aerating. So it holds moisture, doesn't compact, doesn't rot, doesn't go off. It's got a lot of good stuff going for it. So having it as an addition to a mix is quite useful. As I say, it's something I've always thought of perlite as the stuff you mix in for your garden tubs, sort of that sort of thing, and you hang in baskets and stuff. I haven't thought of it as a media for anything to do with orchids before. Right, so that is good root system, good new roots forming in places, yeah, so that's good. This is actually in bud. I've only just noticed. It's actually got a bud on there, so we should have a flower on there soon. This does seriously look like more than one plant, quite honestly. This piece here doesn't look connected, and it's got its own root base. Masdevallias are popular. I'm going to separate them and put them in separate pots. Then I've got one for somebody else as a swapsy, because Masdevallias are looking a bit more appealing for my environment now. With my cooler temperatures, in theory they should do a lot better than they did round the other place, so having a few more is not a big deal. So having swapsies is also, useful. Right, so that'll do. We don't need to take every little straggly piece of stringy stuff off. So that's one. Also, by separating these, I can now get these in small pots. The smaller the better, so that they're nice and tight, and they won't be going back in a black pot. That's for sure. So now this one's got, the back end of the plant is actually dead, so we will remove that. And that will take some more of the dead roots off as well. So there we go. That's not an extensive root system, but it's a perfectly adequate root system for the amount of leaves on the plant. On this part of the plant. Alright, here comes trouble. You coming out? Nope. Wow is cat for no. Basically, I'd like to think that he could hear the rain, but unfortunately his hearing is shot to pieces, so he can't hear very well at all. You shouldn't be able to creep up on a cat, can you? And if he's sitting looking out the window, you can walk right up behind him, and when you put your hand on him, he jumps because he didn't know you were there. So his hearing's not too good at all. Right, so there we go then. So we've got a Restrepia. That can go in the same pot, but it needs to go deeper so that there's less media. It won't stay soggy then. Same with that one, that can go back in the same pot, and again just go deeper down in. And then here we need two new pots. Small one for this part of the plant. We do have new roots growing here and a new growth. So this piece should pull on. It'll take a bit longer than the other piece, but it should grow on okay. And then this will be the main plant that I'll keep for me. Do you know there's some back end of this plant could do with coming off as well. These back bits with the dead stalks, they end up rotting, and they can set the rot off into the rest of the plant. So if you can separate them off, it does help. Right, there we go. That'll do. I'll have a clear up. There's not much to clear up, quite honestly. And yeah, I'll come back with some media. We'll get these 3, which have now become 4, into their pots. Right, on top of the heater noise, we've now got rain. Desperately wanted to get on with repotting my bonsai. I did one yesterday, and the thing was in mud basically, and it's really difficult working with really muddy, claggy material. But I don't know. That remains to be seen. That's less important than clearing off my list with the orchids. If the bonsai that need repotting this year don't get done, they're not going to die. They just won't grow as well as they might have done. So right, so Restrepia, very fine root system, and in this case not a very good root system, but it's there, and this one started to bloom recently as well. So it's a matter of keeping it hydrated. So we'll have some chunky stuff so that we don't block the air cone, and then we'll have small bark. As I said, I don't want these potted deep. Now I've got 2 Restrepias to do, so we'll try and mix up enough for 2. Running out of space here. We'll have some perlite. It holds moisture and doesn't go off. I don't see as it helps the other media not go off. I can't see as it has properties that could do that, but it is a useful addition. And what we're going to have this time is, yes, we're going to have some moss, but unlike before, it's going to be very small pieces. So it's going to be well chopped up so that it will mix in really well. The big long strands are not conducive really to a very fine root system. That's just not going to work. So we will chop it up nice and small so that it will mix in well. We shouldn't get any huge lumps of just moss. We should get a reasonably even mix throughout the pot. That's the theory. It's a bit tedious doing this. Of course, this moss is dry. It hasn't actually been wetted. But because it's in small pieces, when I water this pot, it will absorb the moisture. It means I'll have to water it again in a couple of days, but that's no big deal. Trying to work like this with it wet wouldn't be so good. Now, previously when I've used the moss and I've had it wet, I've just been folding it into the media. But that's a different principle. That's okay when it's wet, but working with a fine root system like this, large pieces of moss like that just wouldn't work. There'd be areas in the pot that, parts of the root system that just didn't have media around them. It will get clogged up. And when you start pulling this stuff apart, you realise that there is actually a lot of this. Now in a mix like that, that's useful stuff. Now this mix is for the Restrepias, it's not for the Masdevallias. You've only got to look at the difference in the roots. It should be obvious. The finer the root system, the finer the mix needs to be. As a general rule, there will always be some exceptions. Right, that'll do me. A couple of big lumps here. But until you start to mix, you can't see them. Right, there we go. Now I've got some in the bottom, but I don't want too much because I want this in deep. I want this in quite deep. So that there isn't effectively a huge amount of media. I don't want a huge amount of media. I want this quite shallow. It's proven by experience that this particular type of Restrepia is not a deep rooter. It's a shallow rooter. And with a fine root system and shallow roots, the worst thing you can do is have 3 inches of media underneath those roots, and those roots are never going to grow into it. And if they're never going to grow into it, it will just remain wet. It will never dry out properly. That's that one done. That will get watered in. And I'm actually going to put a pair of stakes on that. I think it was like this before, but what you do basically is you put a stake in, and you put another stake in the other side, pointy end goes in the media. It works much better that way. And then you just get one of these clips and basically cross swords. Get the leaves in amongst them and just cross them over the top and put a clip on. And it just helps hold the plant upright, stops it wobbling around quite so much. So good water for that one. That'll do fine, and hopefully those roots will get going a bit better with that moss. That will help aid root regeneration. So that's one done. Not in the mood. Keep making mistakes when you don't really want to get on with stuff. Right. Now this is a much bigger plant, and it does have a deeper root system, but not much deeper. But nonetheless, this is a much bigger plant. So again, we will crop. This isn't an air cone pot. And then we'll put some in the bottom. Now we've got a much bigger root system this time, so there's got to be some wiggling going on to make sure the media gets in those lower root sections. So we don't put so much in. Yeah, we put a lesser amount in so that you can see what you're doing basically. If you fill the pot up, you can't see what's going on down at the lower end of that root system. You can't see whether you're getting in between the roots or not. Now I can see it. So we're doing okay. And then you can top up and bring in your level up to where the top of the plant is. Very fine root system like this, the last thing you want is air gaps. You need all of the roots to be in contact with media. They're very, very fine, and they frazzle incredibly easy if they get dry. And if they get dry with heat, they really will frazzle. That's a good guess, wasn't it? There we go. Now this one's self-supporting, so this one doesn't need staking. Check for air pockets, none. Goody goody. Tag back in and out of the way. Right, that's the 2 Restrepias done. Now we've got a different mix coming up now, and effectively we're going back to a media that's more akin to what we were doing for the odonts. So again, good smattering of the perlite mix in there. I must get on to Hannah today to get another tub ordered. I mean, it comes from Amazon Prime, so it's normally within 24 hours you've got your goods. Sorry, 48. But if I send her the email with the link, then she can order another one, and it gets delivered here. It saves me worrying about postage or anything like that. You know. She pays for Prime because of her little business that she runs. So it's not an overhead for her. I send her the link, so all she's got to do is use the link, and that will take her into her Amazon account, or via her Amazon account, and see, I'm just not concentrating. This needs to be wet because it's going in large, so we'll have to wait a while. Happens to be some water there, which was handy. Let's get some wet. Yeah, when you're using it like this, if I put this in dry, because it'll have large amounts in places, when I pour the water through, it's probably not going to absorb that much, and it could stay quite dry. But that's not what you want. These little bits like this, they'll get wet when I water it. They're not a problem, it's the bigger pieces. Pardon me. Let's finish that up before it goes cold. A miserable day. There's so much I wanted to do that involves not being outside, although some of it does. But the stuff that's outside, to bring it in here and work on it when it's all dripping wet is just not comfortable, so it's going to end up not getting done. My talk I cracked on with yesterday, and I got a fair bit done. The bones are there. Now that I've got the structure, the sections in my head, some of which have been filled in, I can fill in the gaps now. Obviously I've got to record a soundtrack to it for YouTube, and then take it off again for the actual thing. But yeah, I got the bare bones of it done yesterday, so I was well pleased with that. Right. So we're going back to the odont type principle of having the full length strands, larger amounts, with the bark and the perlite mixed in, and folding it in down the sides. Now the one that's got the hollow up underneath, I will actually put some, I'm going to get that out of the way because it'll only end up getting knocked over or something daft. Right, so we've got two little pots here, one slightly bigger than the other, and that's for the larger plant. Enough to cover the drainage holes, the air cone. Right, see now this one's got a hollow up underneath, so we'll put some in the bottom to start with, and that's for my root tips to get into, and if they go down through that into the crocking, that doesn't matter. And then we need to get some of this up in there like that, and hold it while we twist these roots in, so that I know that central section has got media in it, and then drop the plant down in. There we go. And then we go to the folding it in down the side routine like we do for the odonts. So not crushing the roots, just folding this down the sides, so that the media's got some, the roots have got some media alongside them. And you can see where the roots were when this came out of the pot. It's just a thing. They seem to head the outside of the pot away from the centre. And that just seems to be how they grow. I don't want this all squashed in tight. I need some air in there. I've seen pictures of Masdevallias actually growing in rainforests where they're not even growing on a branch or anything like that. All that stripping moss that hangs off the branches, they're growing in that. So they're not even attached to a branch. They're just hanging in thin air almost. You sort of think, well, the first gust of wind is going to blow them down. But it doesn't. They seem to hang on there. That's where they live. And I suppose really if the areas are so moist that if they did happen to fall off down to the ground, there's still plenty for them to grow in on the ground, if you know what I mean. So, right, so I'm just getting some moss around the base because the new roots are coming out. That'll give them something to get straight into. Right, so that's that one. That'll do nicely. There we go, that's one done. Now we've got the little one to do. I shall need a new label. I've got two now. Right, now we've got plenty of bark here, but what we haven't got is enough moss for this little one. Just have a look. This has got an air cone, so chunky bits. Some in the bottom. Now I will need a bit more. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to dunk it in my hand and squeeze it just to make sure it's moist. We'll just add that in. Can't get it right all the time. I do guess reasonably well with mixing up media. And I always sort of think along the lines, if there's some left over, it can just go in a bag and come out next time round. Right, so this one, the roots are a little bit more fragile on this. But nonetheless, I still want media in the centre, so I'm going to do the same again. Put some in the centre before I tuck the roots in. Try and tuck these round. Roots are relatively flexible on Masdevallias, but don't push your luck. If you try bending them too much, they will break. Most of the time, Masdevallias have got branching root systems, but some haven't. Some are quite, you know, you hold the plant up and each root that you're looking at comes from the base of the plant and goes down to either a root tip or a dormant root tip, and that's how they are. Moss up around the base of the plant. Helps keep the base of the plant moist. And with this moss, sphagnum moss, you have got sterilising type properties in the moss, so it tends to inhibit rot rather than encourage it like perhaps some other moss might. Like live moss probably would, because it's going to keep everything wet, which is not ideal. Right, so we've got moss around the base. We've got no label for this, but I know what it is. No air pockets. There we go then. That's today's session. And we get those watered in and get them back in their place where they go. And that'll be today's orchid video. I'd love to have done another bonsai repot, but the thought of trying to untangle roots and get the media off of something that's absolutely sodden, you know, it's like working with mud. It's horrible. So I'm just going to wait for things to dry out a bit, I think. So there we go. And tomorrow's Sunday chat, there will be one. What it's going to be about, I don't know. How long it's going to be, I don't know. But we'll get something done. We need to get back to some sort of routine again and some sort of normality. So see you tomorrow. Thanks for dropping by. Well, yeah, What else? There was something else I was going to say. No, I've forgotten. See you tomorrow. Thanks for dropping by.